I'm Tony Maroulis, the Executive Director of External Relations and University Events at UMass Amherst, and a member of the Sammy's Marketing Committee. Most of my heroes are writers, so it's a particular honor to be here tonight and serve as your Master of Ceremonies for this 4th annual Sammy celebration. I kind of think that this is Amherst's Oscars. It's one of my favorite events for sure. We welcome you all. Tonight we honor the accomplishments of 2 distinguished individuals who have made lifelong contributions to the written word and have also nurtured important cultural and educational institutions that have significantly enriched our community. You will hear more about Cammie McGovern and Arthur Kinney in a few minutes, but let me say that the Jones trustees and staff are absolutely delighted to publicly recognize their commitment, talent, and scholarly work. The Sammys are also an opportunity for us to gather and reflect on the importance of our library as a foundational institution in the town of Amherst. God bless you. The Jones Library continues to serve more patrons than any other public library in Western Massachusetts outside of Springfield, and its circulation and programs grow substantially each year. But there's much more the library can and should do, and, as I hope you are aware, the trustees, staff, and many community volunteers are engaging in a process to renovate and expand the Jones. They are doing this so that the Jones Library can become a 21st century learning center, doing more for children, teens, and families, and providing better services to those seeking a new job, who want to learn English in a supportive setting, who require access to technology or need to connect with social services, and of course, those who need help researching their papers, articles, dissertations, business plans, and so much more. We are here tonight to present the 4th annual Samuel Minot Jones Award for Literary Achievement. We fondly call this award the Sammy, and it is presented to members of our community who have made a difference in the lives of all of us who treasure the written word. This event is the culmination of many hours of preparation by many people. There are many volunteers and donors to thank, and I want to especially recognize our lead underwriter, People's Bank, which has been so generous to this event since its inception. In addition to People's Bank, we are extremely grateful to our major sponsors, Barry Roberts and TD Bank. Other event sponsors include the Amherst Club, Amherst College, C.L. Frank & Company, the Davis Financial Group, Financial Development Agency, Feingold Alexander Architects, Greenfield Savings Bank, Hampshire College, Pasucci and Teixeira, and the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Please join me in thanking them and the other local businesses who have taken out ads in our program booklet for their support. One other note, after we conclude the awards presentation, we hope you will join our honorees here on the stage for a book signing. Books are available for purchase in the lobby thanks to Nat Harold, a former Sammy winner, and Amherst Books. Once you've had your books signed, please enjoy coffee and a chocolate confection on the patio. That sounds awesome, doesn't it? All right. So I'm happy at this time to introduce Sabina Murray, who will present our first award, the Sammy for Significant Contribution to Literary Culture, to Arthur Kinney. Sabina Murray is an award-winning screenwriter and novelist, as well as a professor in the MFA program for poets and writers at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Her novels include Slow Burn, The Caprices, A Carnivor's Inquiry, Forgery, and Tales of the New World. Her most recent novel, Valiant Gentleman, was one of the New York Times Book Review's 100 Notable Books of 2016, in which it was described as an audacious historical novel about the Irish revolutionary martyr Roger Casement. Please join me in welcoming Sabina Murray to the podium.
Thank you, Tony, and so great to see all of you here for this event, which I have introduced before at this event, and I love it. This is fabulous. As I sat to write this introduction, it occurred to me that I did not know what, in particular, had occasioned Arthur Kinney to receive this award. This is not because Arthur does not deserve an award, specifically the Samuel Minot Jones Award for Literary Achievement, but rather because Arthur has done so much that any of a number of things could have led to this moment. Arthur Kinney has written widely on Flannery O'Connor, Dorothy Parker, and William Faulkner, but is largely known for his work on Renaissance literature. In this area, he has been astonishingly productive, publishing books such as Lies Like Truth, Shakespeare, Macbeth, and the Cultural Moment, and has edited several volumes, the Cambridge Companion to English Literature, 1500 to 1600, and the Oxford Handbook to Shakespeare. This connection to Renaissance studies gloriously sealed with his founding of the University of Massachusetts Center for Interdisciplinary Renaissance Studies, which confirms, along with his firm handle on all things Renaissance, his ability to get people to give him things. And here we are, all gathered together to give him something else, although our offering perhaps lacks the acreage of the other. Are we giving Arthur Kinney this award for his monumental presence in literary studies? Or because of his work as a devoted teacher, something that I can attest to, having worked alongside him at UMass for over a decade, an institution where Arthur Kinney taught for half a century. All of this may be true and should be accounted for, but I am personally pleased to see Arthur Kinney receiving this award, and I will explain, if you will permit, why if this were my personal award to give, I would give it to Arthur Kinney. So basically, if this were the Sabina Murray Award for Literary Achievement, why Arthur Kinney would top my list. When I first interviewed at UMass in 2003, I did the obligatory reading, and afterward, Professor Kinney approached me and said how much he had enjoyed the story. We were all set to go out for dinner at Pinocchio's. Remember Pinocchio's? And Arthur offered to give me a ride. We were barely off campus when conversation turned to the then new Renaissance Center, and we found ourselves quickly making a U-turn so that I could check it out. Of course, the grounds were impressive, the building itself delightful. However, what Arthur Kinney wanted to show me most of all was the library. In the basement of this building were rows of shelves filled with books. He wanted to show me his recent acquisition, a gorgeous vellum-bound thing. And it's been several years now since I saw it, but I think it was some sort of accounting register, lovingly compiled by monks, and close to 400 years old. Like all powerful books, it had that ability to transport. And as we held it together, leafing through the heavy pages with their feathery script, I knew that he and I were members of the same society. Not the Masons, but something like it, the people who love books. It was a sort of welcome that had and still has a profound resonance. There have been other times when I have wished to give Arthur Kinney an award. Once, while visiting Oxford, where I was giving a lecture, I found myself at high table at Merton College. I ended up seated next to the ranking fellow, a Milton scholar by the name of Richard McCabe. He was suitably horrified to find himself next to an American author. And as I managed through the fish course, having now identified my fish fork, I struggled to identify a good topic to sustain us that fit within the erudite chit-chat parameters of high table. Once cycling tours through Belgium, McCabe's offering, was dispensed with, I had a moment's panic, but then sunlight burst through the clouds. I asked McCabe if he had ever visited UMass, or the Renaissance Center, or perhaps if he knew my friend, Arthur Kinney. Mentioning Arthur's name in this instance acted as a sort of password. Suddenly, McCabe relaxed. He had met Arthur Kinney and, of course, knew his work. And if Arthur Kinney were my friend, well, I couldn't be all that bad. Clearly, all that one needed to succeed at Oxford was knowledge of a fish fork and Arthur Kinney. I filed this experience away, feeling I might have use for it in the future. And sure enough, the opportunity presented itself. I was on the island of Sark in the Channel Islands, researching for a recent novel. The woman who was renting me the room knew everyone on the island. Not a big feat, because after 5 days, I did too. And she suggested that I go to the newly set up historical archive that was run by a guy named Richard Axton, recently retired from Cambridge. So I went down there, not sure what I'd find by way of person or research material. And the research material, at least what I could see of it at that moment, looked truly provocative. But standing between it and me was Richard Axton, who seemed unwilling to step aside. Chit-chat ensued, or more truthfully, was deployed by me as Axton was in a hurry to get back to his work of restoring a nearby cider press. Woman writer did not impress, nor did college professor, but I had not yet played my trump card. Do you perhaps know my good friend, Arthur Kinney? And Axton did. He had been at a conference with Arthur sometime in the 80s and since then had thought of him fondly and with respect. Axton then presented me with a key, a tour, and, greatest honor, the location on a high shelf of the tin that held his favorite biscuits. I have other Arthur stories. He has assisted me with my writing. An example suggested that I replace pub with alehouse in a short story set in the 17th century. Once, trying to get funding for a performance space, Arthur Kinney and I sat together at Bertucci's, composing a letter to James Franco. We are still waiting to hear back. But all of this matter. The fact that I have so much to say on my friend Arthur Kinney speaks to his profound engagement with all things literary, things that I know because of the great gift of Arthur Kinney's friendship. And others have stories too, because this is not my award for literary excellence, but the Samuel Minot, an award given to a person who has affected not just individuals, but the community as a whole. Arthur Kinney's literary scholarship may be legendary, but so is his generosity. He gives and gives and gives. And because of this, I am deeply honored by the opportunity to be part of this occasion when the great gift of your generosity can be recognized, when we, in turn, can give to you. Thank you.
On dark nights, near the close of World War II, some Amherst residents would trudge north up a dirt road, now East Pleasant Street, to the pasture of the Montague Dairy Farm to spot enemy aircraft. And there, and then, Janet Wilder, the younger sister of the Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright and novelist Thornton Wilder, met Winthrop Saltonstall Dakin, a descendant of a prominent political family in the Commonwealth, who lived with his brother Hazard atop the house alongside the golf course in Amherst Center. Janet was a graduate PhD from the University of Chicago and now a science teacher at Mount Holyoke College. Toby was a graduate of Harvard Law School, now practicing pro bono law in Northampton and moderating Amherst town meetings. 2 years later, they married, and in 1948, built a house of brick with a slate roof modeled on a Renaissance English cottage in the conventional shape of the letter E for Queen Elizabeth. In the due course, the large Montague pasture became home to the newborn colt Jeffy, about whom Janet would write newspaper columns and eventually a book. Professor Tony Borton recalls that when he and Janet went fundraising for UMass, she would always begin by saying that she had been graduated in private schools, but it was her obligation and theirs to support public ones. Exactly 20 years after the house was built, Janet died, having outlived Toby and having willed her estate to the UMass Foundation in Boston, which still owns it. A short time later, 3 women, Dean Lee Edwards of the College of Humanities and Fine Arts, who is now reelected as a trustee of Jones Library, Beverly Wood, Associate Chancellor for Space and Campus Planning, and Patricia Crossan, then the Associate Provost for Special Programs. They persuaded David Scott to transform the property into a Renaissance Center, the 6th one in North America, the 12th one in the world. Inside the Dakin House, all the walls were painted a dark forest green. All the floors were covered with linoleum for the sake of the stray animals that Janet would collect and support. Now the interior is off-white, the house much brighter, and the new oak floors have oriental rugs just like the Jones Library. Upstairs, Toby's study is now the graduate seminar room, with a closet that could be a priest's hole under Elizabethan surveillance against Catholics. The room is named for the art historian Iris Kinney. The guest room is the publications office for 2 international journals. Toby's downstairs bedroom now belongs to the librarian, Geoffrey Goodhind, where over 1,000 books printed before 1700 are preserved and cataloged. He succeeds Janet Moulding, who recently retired as director of the Forbes Library in Northampton. Janet Dakin's bedroom now belongs to the new director, Joseph Black. In between is the office of Ellen Carroll McLean, the office manager and the program director. But the Dakins are still there too. A Saltonstall family portrait hangs in the director's office, a gift of Mason Lawrence. A trail around the pasture is called the Kestrel Trail in honor of Toby's favorite bird and those who used to feed on his meadow. And now we have built a special Kestrel birdhouse to put at the western end. We have done it, but the birds went to Maple Street in Hadley. Some ideas work and some don't. Janet is still there too, in the cat door, which leads down to the collections room. In Janet's Ming Dynasty statue of a horse in the reading room that gave her the color scheme for the house of orange and green. And Jeffy's blue ribbons are still on display next to his stall. And in the barn, which is now a black box constructed by undergraduate Renaissance students and built with a grant from the state legislature, thanks to Senator Stanley Rosenberg. And the fundraising pancake breakfast still uses syrup from the property's maple trees, just as Janet did every year. The newsletter of the center, which comes out twice a year, always has a page about the Dakins. And the Montagues are not forgotten either. There's a wooden trail named for them along the driveway as you approach the main house. The downstairs undergraduate seminar and common room, with a fine view of the pasture and the mountain range beyond, is named for the late Carl Swanson, a founder of Applewood, who taught the university's first interdisciplinary course, joining the English and botany departments, and called Humanists and Scientists, the Way We See. Annual lectures now honor Dan Collins and Norman Berlin, and a local sonnet fest where campus and community join together to read Renaissance sonnets. That is named for the center's poet laureate, G. Stanley Kohler, and his wife, Jean, and is now managed each year by John Nelson. Other endowed lectures are the classical influence in the Renaissance, and one by some local celebrity on his choice of the topic of the Renaissance. The reading room is staffed by docents, founded by Grace Rawlison. The vestibule bears her name, and a host of men and women. From the earliest, Doris Holden has been one of them, under the direction now of Jackie Price, carry on supervision of that service. Catherine Lombardi sewed and arranged for pillows for the chairs in the reading room. The book rests come from the Bodleian Library in Oxford, England. The brass table lamps come from the New York Public Library. And just outside are restrooms, which are now map rooms, holding Renaissance maps as well, so you can't escape the Renaissance once you're inside. Academically, the center thrives. The library has been home to visiting scholars for 5 continents, North and South America, Europe, Asia, Australia. The collection, now over 50,000 books and manuscripts, includes a large antiphonal with wooden covers and metal locks donated by Bonnie Strickland, the earliest English book printed in Greek, given by Fred and Edith Byron, the only history of the Sisters of Poor Clare in Spain, their official manuscript record from 1550 to late in the 19th century, found in Oviedo, and the first folio of the plays of Beaumont and Fletcher, given by the noted scholar William A. Ringler, Jr., who also gave William Wordsworth's own personal and autographed copy of Sir Philip Sidney's Arcadia, England's best-selling novel from 1594 to 1740. If you visit, you can see and hold these and other treasures as well. And just outside the collections room is a Renaissance-like printing press given by Amherst College. Outside, all the gardens are authenticated by the center's herbal of 1630. There's an herb garden given by Smith College and tended by Barbara Schumann, the knot garden given by Hampshire College and the Swanson family, the rose and lavender gardens, the grotto, the performance garden, named for Walter Chmielewski, given by his sister and her partner for a graduate student who died just as he was beginning a dissertation on John Milton, the Bernard Spivak Shakespeare Garden with all the plants and flowers from Shakespeare's plays, and the Scholars Retreat Garden, named for the local actress Emily List. Specimen trees honor faculty members Pamela Edwards and Norman Berlin, and several others have been given by Otto and Diane Stein. There is an orchard of 8 different apple trees known to be grown in the Renaissance, thanks to Wes Audio of the Stockbridge School. And the center of it all is that huge kitchen garden directed by John Gerber. It's surrounded by an authentic wattle fence, built not with the customary willow, now in scarce supply, but with similar ash. So I guess it's not entirely authentic. Similar ash which came by train from Florida. All the gardens were supervised by Dennis Porter and now by Ellen Cosmer. The community has supplied gifts and annual support from hundreds of local people and people on the campus, and ends each year with a Renaissance fair the first Sunday in May, which means it's this Sunday coming up, from 10 to 4 in the Great Meadow, full of crafts and activities for the whole family and their pets. It has crafts and activities like hawking and swordplay and weaving and ceramics. And like the weekly lectures called Wednesdays at 4 and the monthly concerts of Renaissance music called First Sundays, like the day-long conferences and the community classes, like the reading group founded by Carolyn Holstein and Nancy Gregg, virtually all events are free and open to the public. The program is augmented by the center's partners, the Amherst Women's Club, Arcadia Players, Amherst Club, Amherst Rotary, Shakespeare, Hampshire Shakespeare, Enchanted Circle Theater for the Holyoke Public Schools, and Shakespeare Players East from Turner's Falls. Community classes are also held on different aspects of the Renaissance from 1400 to 1700. You can learn what made us the way we are. People are always welcome to come and tour the gardens, tour the house, look at the manuscripts, look at the maps. From 10 to 4, Monday through Friday. But when you're in the reading room, you may see Tony Burton, who is our lifelong fellow, but you will also see some of the rare books as well, and you'll see 2 gargoyles over the doorways with their finger to their lips like this, and a little sign that says in a prominent place, "Please tread lightly and talk little." Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to read a brief statement from UMass Chancellor Kumbal Subbaswamy, who could not make it tonight. Arthur Kinney's impact can be felt well beyond the academic and research community of UMass Amherst and the 5 college community, deep in the roots of the region's literary heritage. The Massachusetts Center for Interdisciplinary Renaissance Studies, founded by Dr. Kinney, is truly a gem of UMass Amherst and of the 5 colleges. The center's beautiful grounds, annual events, rare book collection, and strong sense of community are the purest reflection of his leadership and generosity. Indeed, Dr. Kinney's half-century of distinguished service to our community is evident all around us. Dr. Kinney is published widely. His research interests include Renaissance prose, poetry, and drama in 20th century American literature, with specialties in William Faulkner, Flannery O'Connor, and Dorothy Parker. Recent projects include Shakespeare in the Mind's Eye, based on Renaissance and current cognitive studies, revisiting titled Elizabethans, and publishing a volume of selected essays. Dr. Kinney has devoted his career and his heart to Renaissance studies. Dr. Kinney was once quoted as saying, "I don't sleep, I dream." I will forever be grateful for being a part of that dream. Congratulations, Arthur, on this well-deserved honor. I didn't know I had this part, so I'm a... No, that's not the right one. Here we are. So, I owe you lunch, but I'm giving you the award.
Thank you. Is this instead of lunch?
This is better than lunch, I think.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Senate President Stan Rosenberg and Representative Solomon Goldstein Rose were unable to be here this evening, but they have sent citations for our honorees from their respective legislative bodies. To present the citations, we are honored to have Representative Solomon Goldstein Rose's District Coordinating Aide, Carolyn Kelly, here with us tonight. Carolyn, could you come up?
Hello. I do not have a wonderful speech or an offer of lunch, but I do have these very official citations. If I can get them out from underneath this binder. Whoops. This one is from the state Senate. There's a similar one from the House. I will not read both at this time because they are almost the same. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts State Senate official citation. Be it known that the Massachusetts Senate hereby extends congratulations to Arthur Kinney in recognition of receiving the 2017 Samuel Minot Jones Award of Significant Contributions to Amherst Literary Culture. And, be it further known, the Massachusetts Senate extends its best wishes for continued success, that this citation be only signed by the President of the Senate and attested to, and a copy thereof transmitted by the Clerk of the Senate. Signed, Stan Rosenberg.
Thank you, Carolyn. Next, Carrie McGee will present the Sammy Award for Local Literary Achievement to Cammie McGovern. Carrie McGee is the Vice President of Family Services at Pathlight, a nonprofit organization that serves children and adults with disabilities throughout Western Massachusetts. Carrie, along with Cammie McGovern, was one of the founders of Whole Children, and she was its first executive director. Carrie has 4 children, one born with Williams syndrome, a rare genetic disorder. It was through their children that Cammie and Carrie met and began their adventure together. Please join me in welcoming Carrie.
Thank you. Well, I'm thrilled to have a chance to talk about Cammie, who famously talks about everybody but herself. So this is a great opportunity. Cammie and I were introduced to one another by a fellow parent when our children were in Amherst Integrated Preschool together. We found ourselves cast into the world of disability, where information was scarce, and what did exist consisted of the movie Rain Man and articles filled with medical jargon. The experience of raising a child with a disability is like one of those roller coaster rides in the pitch dark, where you know there are big ups and downs coming, but you don't know from which direction or when. Today, I have the privilege of honoring Cammie McGovern. To me, she represents the high point of this adventure, the gift of deep and true friendship. Cammie and I are the unlikeliest of friends. Cammie grew up in the heart of Los Angeles. I grew up on top of a mountain in the Adirondacks of New York. Population 50 people, 100 dogs. Cammie was raised by her Harvard-educated professor parents. There was no library in my town. which means my reading options were how-to manuals and my mother's Harlequin romances. If we had a movie theater, I might have known that Cammie's sister was the famous actress Elizabeth McGovern. We did, however, get one spotty television station, if it wasn't cloudy, and we watched Happy Days. So you can imagine my thrill when we received an award from Parent Magazine for starting Whole Children, traveled to New York City for the ceremony. After walking a red carpet into a private celebration filled with several well-known celebrities, none other than Henry Winkler walks over, looks at Cammie and says, "I know you." After which, the three of us laughed as an amusing story unfolded that involved a young Cammie backing up a van full of summer campers and the demise of Henry Winkler's prize car. But at the playground, when our kids were still little and Whole Children was barely an idea, we didn't know how different we were. We were simply two fellow mothers, sharing the same fear that our kids would not have friends, would not be part of their community unless we did something about it. We set out to build Whole Children, a place where our children could not only meet friends, but learn how to be friends. We'd already realized you can't assume that'll happen on its own. Now, I'm shy by nature, having spent most of my time with trees and animals. I understood the mechanics of how to start a business, and because we lived it, our little group of founders had a keen instinct for what kids needed. But I have no doubt that without Cammie, we'd still be a sweet little class, helping a handful of kids in the back room of a building next to the Connecticut River. Cammie's like a spring breeze blowing into a room after a long winter. If our group lost hope, doubting whether we could pull this off, Cammie would breeze in and announce, "Good news, guys, cheap wine and Dixie cups." Then she'd proceed to pour everyone a little wine, propose a toast to us, and off we'd be, working through the next insurmountable problem. If Cammie wrote a grant, we got the money. We could write down the details of what we were trying to do, but Cammie's gift of words made people understand why it was important. If Cammie found out more students were needed to run a class, she'd show up, checkbook in hand, neighborhood kids in tow. Where do you need them? In time, our children did become friends. Whole Children grew and hundreds more joined the community, one friend at a time. But we realized it wasn't enough to create a safe and welcoming community for families. It was important to also educate, even try to change the larger community, so someday everyone might be welcome everywhere. Cammie set out to accomplish this in her books, from Eye Contact to Say What You Will and A Step Toward Falling, and now with her books for younger kids, Just My Luck and Chester and Gus, she has provided for others what we didn't have, a genuine portrayal of people with disabilities in literature. Example after example of the different kinds of friendships that are possible when people take the time to learn something new, to see past the surface differences and find the gifts hidden in each of us. She's traveled the country tirelessly, sharing her work, her words, and her humor. Through Cammie's gift as a writer, her engaging presence in everything she touches, and her extraordinary work ethic, she's planted seeds that will grow, ripple outward, and continue to make the world a better place. It is my privilege and honor to introduce my dear friend, Cammie McGovern.
Carrie always says she's not a good speaker, and it used to be that Carrie would say, Cammie, you have to speak because you know how bad I am at it, and that was just beautiful. That was wonderful, and I feel like I'm going to pale in comparison. But I'm actually wanted to spend most of my time talking about my relationship with the Jones, and just a little bit about what I write and why I write. And it's partly because this is my chance to, and the Jones has meant a great deal to me over the years, and I've never gotten a chance to. So this award means the world to me for many reasons, but the main one is the simplest. I have always loved libraries. I have in ways, it has always been true in ways that go so deep and seem so private, it's actually hard for me to write about them. In every city I've moved to, I have, within a week or two of arriving, found the best public library, and inside found my own favorite carrel or corner, where I have spread out my rough drafts, my notebooks, all my writing utensils, and then have spent, more often than not, the next 3 or 4 hours reading other people's books. 18 years ago, we moved to Amherst, and the Jones became the place where I came for this ritual. It coincided with a particularly hard time in our lives. We were the parents of one child at the time, a 2-year-old who wasn't learning to talk the way other toddlers his age were. Just prior to moving here, I'd been a Stegner Fellow at Stanford, where most of my peers had been snapped up by agents and bestowed with writing contracts before leaving town. I had neither an agent nor a contract. Instead, I had 2 unpublished novels and very little reason to believe anyone would want the 3rd book I was working on. When I am asked now, as I often am by school children who relish stories of failure, if I was ever rejected, what kept me going, I tell them the truth. I was rejected a lot for 10 long years, and I have no idea what kept me going, except that I simply loved writing and everything about it. By this I mean I loved dreaming up stories, writing them out longhand in notebooks, running into roadblocks, and reading my way out of them. Which is to say, I loved everything I did when I came to the library. I've often wondered why I feel so at home with the wide mix of people who spend the most time in public libraries. The obsessive readers and researchers who spend hours pulling books off of shelves and leave them all behind in little piles to be reshelved at the end of the day. The Rip Van Winkles who rustle through the newspaper and fall asleep beneath it. The people who mutter arguments with their books or quietly weep in the corner as they read. The truth is, I feel comfortable in this world because I've done all of these things. I've wandered the aisles pulling my favorite books off the shelves to keep me going. I have fallen asleep. I have worked in corners with tears in my eyes. For the last 17 years, I have done this at the Jones, writing some or most of my 7 published books here alongside my other library denizens. These are my people scattered around the fiction section, stretched out over all of us is the mural of Emily Dickinson, in pastel shades of mauve and magenta, with a surprising assortment of other figures hard at work beside her. One man pushes a wheelbarrow, another woman sews. I don't know anything about this mural or the odd mix of people it's brought together under a banner of Emily's words. Hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul. But it's fitting, isn't it? Here we all are, working away, mad closeted geniuses, every one of us. And we've come to this place to spread out our truest selves under Emily's benevolent eye. Libraries are, for many of us, the public places where we bring our most private selves, our fears and our dreams so long buried and so studiously unspoken, the librarian checking out a stack of books may be the equivalent of the first person we've told a secret to. Which brings me to a second but very related point. Every bit as much as I love libraries, I also love librarians. I love the shy nod and the smile that acknowledges someone's presence but doesn't interrupt what they're doing. I love overhearing one side of a reference librarian's phone conversation. You need the name of an endangered animal from South America that's also pink? A real one. I love watching them gracefully handle the range of needs of eclectic people, myself included, and what we present to them. In general, I don't think of myself as a shy person except about things that matter most to me, and then I become surprisingly tongue-tied. When our son was finally diagnosed with autism at the age of 3, I spent the first week afterward visiting but not checking out the books in the library that would help us understand what we were up against. Because we were still so new in town, I knew none of the librarians then. The closest I'd come to a conversation with any of them was the patient way one librarian in the children's room allowed Ethan to crawl beneath her desk to see where all her electrical outlets were. "So smart," she said, when he found them. At that point, we had no diagnosis. I was terrified of the countless ways that he didn't seem like other toddlers around him. I was still grasping at straws and clinging to tiny life rafts of hope. There, I thought, the librarian thinks he's smart. A few months later, I didn't want to check out the autism books I really needed because I didn't want that librarian to know that the same brain she had politely applauded had a different label now. When I finally did, when the books and the information that they contained were more important than what the librarian might think, guess what? She said nothing. I suspect there might be a class in this for librarians, the essential point being, make no comments on the books being checked out. But she knew. She knew what I hadn't had the courage to tell many friends, neighbors, or even some family members. The librarians also knew when I continued to have so much trouble publishing a book or finding a teaching job that I stood in line with a stack of how to publish magazine articles and get paid books. Admitting you want to write for slick magazines before you've ever been published in one is for many of us acutely embarrassing. The very idea seems full of hubris and self-delusion, like signing up for a beauty pageant when you may or may not be pretty, someone else will decide. The whole business feels harrowing and awful. How could I hand those books over and not think of Yeats? But I, being poor, have only my dreams. I spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly because you tread on my dreams. I have been watching and admiring librarians from a distance for the better part of my working adult life. I now speak as one of your countless patrons, grateful for the silent exchanges we've had. When you've smiled and praised a toddler for crawling under your desk, when you've lent me books that speak volumes to a struggle I am having and said nothing at all. And again, when you've touched one cellophane cover in a stack and said, I love this one, I think it's her best. Books are such a private pleasure that we who write them sometimes have trouble sharing that pleasure. Book clubs are wonderful and slightly awkward as well. Every one that I visit as a writer, I want to join as a participant so we can all sit around on the same level and say what we honestly think. Then again, if we sit around and talk all day about books, we'll never get anything written again. Librarians seem to understand this, perhaps even better than my dear husband, who always interrupts my work to say he hates to interrupt. He just has one quick thing to tell me. Librarians have their own jobs to do and seem to respect that everyone who comes to the library has done so with a purpose, and we all deserve respect and an environment free from cell phones. We must all get on with it. Which brings me back to where I began. I came to Amherst in a dark time in my life, and with the help of the books I found on your shelves, I wrote my way out of it. In the beginning, I read and wrote literary mysteries, sitting in that section in the Jones, near Bruce Watson at one end, myself at the other, one of us writing much faster than the other. Bruce? After my other children arrived, I wandered over to the young adult shelves and read my way through those. My most successful books, the ones I've written for young adults and middle grades, came long after Ethan's diagnosis and after I'd joined with Carrie and the 4 other mothers to start Whole Children. After I'd met scores of young people with disabilities and began to understand that my early silence on Ethan and my inability to discuss any of it presumed that his life and our own would be tainted by sadness forever. Whole Children has taught me otherwise. Ethan and his friends there have no sense of themselves as being in any way unfortunate or less. They have lives and stories as rich and complicated as their typically developing peers, stories that deserve to be told, and the more I read, the more I discovered hadn't been yet. Disability affects 20% of our children today, but it doesn't affect their desire to succeed, to make friends, to be in relationships, and to fall in love. Books help us understand what I couldn't imagine but wish I'd been able to when Ethan was first diagnosed. And now here I am. I came to the Jones as an unpublished writer with degrees and fellowships from fine institutions, but very little evidence from the real world that writing was something I ought to be doing. If anything, the real world had done all it could to gently suggest I find another job. I wrote my books at the Jones because it felt like the sort of practical space where I could both get my work done and keep my dream alive, where some people loaded wheelbarrows and some people sewed and some people wrote about hope being a thing with feathers. At a time in our life when it felt as if many doors were closing, the Jones helped me keep one door open. It gave me an office to come to and co-workers engaged in pursuing their own dreams. I knew none of them by name. We didn't even make eye contact, but it didn't matter. We'd all been given the same gift, permission to go on and a space to do so with resources to boot. I now see this gift every time I see a patron walk in with a determined glint in their eye. I saw it when Garrett started, the former teen librarian, started a teen writing group a few years ago and asked me to come to the first meeting. In his wonderful Garrett way, he'd prepared a gift bag for every teen who showed up, filled with notebooks and pencils, because what else could he put in there? I was only meant to come to the first meeting and the last one, so that's all I did. And still, at that last meeting, I got one of the nicest thank you notes I've ever received. I'd done virtually nothing. I almost wanted to remind them all the gift bags were from Garrett. And then it occurred to me, the thank you was universal. It was in the same vein as every thank you I've ever wanted to extend to every librarian I've ever encountered. Thank you for all of this, for permission to dream, for a place to do so, for everything a gift bag of notebooks and pencils represents to a teen who wants to write but isn't sure she should. Yes, it says, go ahead and do it. I've brought the thank you note. I actually really did save it because it beautifully embodies what I'm trying to say. That it goes on longer than the space allowed. Isn't that perfect? I'm going to leave it with Sharon. True writers in the making. How can we thank you collectively for everything you've done? It would be like trying to thank our parents for a life that contains many periods of quiet happiness. You don't judge our quirks or the number of whole requests we fill out every month. You honor our questions even when they are as random as the recent one Ethan asked the librarian in charge of the music CDs. Have you ever heard of jazz? Do you think you have any? You've given us all a place to come and be ourselves for a time, and in the process we can all imagine becoming someone else.
We're going to call Carolyn back up to read the citations. This time, probably from the house, I think would be good. Yep.
This one will sound very similar to the last one. Also, on a personal note, Cammie, the way you described reading your way through the library, I've had the same experience growing up in Amherst. First reading my way through the children's section, I loved the Camelot books, and then the young adult section, and then realizing there was a whole other part of the library for adult fiction that I just didn't know existed. And that was very nice. So, from the Massachusetts House of Representatives, be it hereby known that the Massachusetts House of Representatives offers its sincerest congratulations to Cammie McGovern in recognition for receiving the 2017 Samuel Minot Jones Award for Local Literary Achievement. The entire membership extends its very best wishes and expresses the hope for future good fortune and continued success in all endeavors.
What a fantastic speech. Thank you. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce our library director, Sharon Shary.
Oh, man. Oh, wow. Thank you both. Thank you both so much. Oh, I'm sorry. Carry on amongst yourselves. Okay. Best job in the world. Congratulations, you guys. Thank you so much. I have very much enjoyed getting to know the two of you in the past year and especially in the past week. Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate the library and the literary life of our community. There are a few people, so I get to follow it up by thanking people, and I want to thank a few people by name. Okay, first I want to thank again our lead sponsor, People's Bank. I know Kim and her family are here somewhere. Thank you all so much for being here. They have supported us for so many years. I want to thank our other major sponsors, Barry Roberts, who I know is not here, but he has always been so wonderful to the library, and TD Bank. They've been another wonderful partner. Number 2, I have to thank the Valley Winds and Brian. I don't know if you're out in the audience here. Your music is spectacular. I want to thank the other, so many community-minded businesses and individuals, starting with Berkshire Brewing for their beer, Judy's Restaurant, they're always so wonderful to us, Oliver Scott, R&P Liquors, and all of those groups who donated their services and their beverages. Thank you all so much. Special thanks to Eileen Smith, Danielle Amadeo, David Little, and everyone here at the Mead Art Museum. Not only do they care deeply about library services and the library patrons in this town, but they are so committed to the staff of the library. And I am so honored to be able to work alongside all of them. One more, please join me in thanking Robert Masla, who is here tonight, the creator of this year's gorgeous art print. Many thanks to Rich Michelson, again from our Michelson Galleries in Northampton. The original piece right now is on display in the lobby, but it's been on display at our Michelson Galleries in Northampton, and the proceeds, so if anybody would like to purchase the original piece, would take home a lovely piece, and a portion of the proceeds gets donated to the library. So thank Rich Michelson, thank you so much. Or you could buy the piece and donate it to the library. Yes, we would love that. Okay, that's everybody. Now, please join our honorees here on stage if you'd like to have a book signed, and then enjoy coffee and confections on your way out. Thank you all so much. Thank you.